One. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Miss Texas Show. This is your co-host, Melissa Santana, and we have a lovely guest with us today. And so I'm very excited to be able to introduce them to you and be able to speak a little bit further. Before that, I do want to formally introduce everyone to our show. So welcome to the Miss Texas Show, where we showcase life in Texas as well as beyond and highlight amazing survivors of traumatic events, family violence, sex trafficking, sexual abuse, and community leaders who share community resources. Under our segment Military Time, we invite military and veterans who would like to share with us their experiences during and after their military service. We run the segment in partnership with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce, and we would like to invite those who have overcome traumatic events and would like to share and are now ready to help others. Under our Beauty for Ashes segment, we invite fellow pageant sisters, winners, and nominees, artists, musicians, actors, models, and dancers, as well as survivors who are now ambassadors for the cause, to share with our audience their lives and the impact they have made. Our show runs twice a month, and if you would like to become a guest on our show, you can email us at msusatexas@gmail.com or message us on our Facebook, which is at Ms. USA Texas, and that is MSUSATEXAS@gmail.com, or again on Facebook. So with that being said, I'm very excited to introduce to you all Ms. Jessica Brown. She is a licensed BSW social worker. So that means that she has her bachelor's of science in social work with a pre-apprenticeship manufacturing certification, despite having a significant disability. She is a survivor of adversity and extreme trauma with a deep passion for helping to empower others and inspire them to thrive, overcome, and be resilient despite their adversity, through sharing her life story, philanthropy, writing, public speaking, and advocacy. She has been a featured guest speaker in podcasts, videos, and a radio show broadcast globally. She has been featured on the Golden Girl Group Home website homepage, which she used to live to inspire other girls that she continues to help. She is a published poet and author who has been quoted by Resilience and is currently involved in the Women Igniting Change program, working on an initiative. She is also been named Rise from Shattered Silence to Strength. She is also a volunteer for the Humanity Preservation Foundation, a volunteer for the National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, an ambassador for West Virginia, and a volunteer point person, as well as facilitator for a female sex abuse support group for SCSA, Survivors of Childhood Sexual Abuse. And so, no small feat there. So this is clearly a busy person who has a lot. And we are so incredibly grateful for you sharing your time with us and being able to share your story and just, being willing just to help us and continue to inspire like you always do. And so with that being said, Jessica, could you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got here, all that jazz.
My name's Jessica Green Brown, and I'm from Huntington, West Virginia. I was awarded the state till I turned 18. I went on to college, graduated with my bachelor's degree in social work, went on to get my license in social work, and pretty much after that, I went and worked at CPS for a year. I ended up getting sick after that, and I took some time off from work. And then recently I've returned to work, and the things that I'm doing are what you listed, which is the Women Igniting Change program. It was 2 years ago, I believe, I got my certification in manufacturing, my pre-apprenticeship. I'm volunteering for the Humanity Preservation Foundation, things of that nature. I'm 38 years old. What more would you like me to describe as far as me?
Sure. Well, that's a beautiful start. Just a little bit more about your journey, that kind of got you into all of these great, feats and things that you're a part of, and even the volunteering and all that.
Well, I was born into a family where my dad was a pedophile, and he sexually abused me until I was 10 years old. So he got 45 to 105 years without the possibility of parole. Whenever I was 15, I testified against him. and that was his sentence. He died of COVID in prison last year in Mount Olive Penitentiary. And I was also sexually abused during that same time frame by my older brother, who was also being molested by my dad, but he was also perpetrating on me and sexually acting out on me. He didn't get any punishment for that because he was still a kid at the time, and they didn't do anything to him for that. For a while, they didn't even know. But CPS, whenever I was 10, actually failed horribly. They left me there after they watched my dad run at me and never came back. They just vanished. CPS literally just vanished. And I was there 3 months, at least 3 months, living in a camper on my driveway, even, after my house burned down. 3 months later, my house burned down. After CPS came, they never came back. And then I was living in a camper on my driveway. They still never came back. I had to change counties. I had to change schools. I had to change houses. I had to tell everybody at my school. I had to tell my neighbors. I told my family. Nobody would do anything until I ran into a cop on a random goose chase that showed up at my new school. This was 6+ months later. So that's how I finally got help. I was put in kinship care at that point, but my dad stalked me because he knew where I was. And my grandmother actually had to pull a gun on him to get him to leave because he was trying to break down her front door. And she said she would blow his brains all over the pavement if he did not leave. So he finally left at that point. But I started running away in kinship care because my brother was taking a belt to me every morning before 5th grade. It was my wake-up call for school. And my aunt had no clue what was going on because she was always in bed when it happened. She sent my brother, I guess, to wake me up, and that was his wake-up call for me. So I started running away, and their solution to that was my aunt tried to tie me up with a belt to one of her dresses. She actually tied me up. And whenever I wriggled free, I ran away again. And when that failed, her husband, my uncle, took a belt to me to try to get me to quit running away. So I was pretty much damned if I did and damned if I didn't. So didn't work. I still continued to run away. But I was only there a few months, and then I was returned to my mom. And then after I tried to bust out a window, I was hospitalized, and then I was placed into my first placement. I was actually removed from my mom's and put in state's custody by CPS at that point. And I went to the Huntington Child Shelter, which is now called something else. I think it's the Children's Home Society now. But I was there for a little while. I ran away from there too. I actually ran to my new foster parents I was supposed to go to. I actually ran to their house. So they moved me to my first foster home after that. And because that one didn't work out for more than 2 months because my foster mom thought I was going to run away. I was standing on her front porch. I was upset about something. I can't even remember what it was. It was a long time ago. I was 11 at this point. And because she thought I was going to run away, she grabbed me and dragged me back into her house. And it ended up a full restraint because I fought back. I don't like to be grabbed. And that was a trigger for me. When she grabbed me, I flipped. And that's always been a trigger for me ever since I can remember. But it's because I was severely beaten and abused by my dad, in addition to the sexual abuse. And it's very triggering for me for somebody to grab me, especially if it's somebody I don't want to touch me or force me to do something I don't want to do. And then I was moved to my second foster home because I refused to stay in the first one the next morning. And that one only ended because I was sent home by CPS to my biological mother. And I actually stayed there probably about 8 months, I think, give or take. I turned 12 while I was there. And let's see here. Whenever I went to live with my mom, she had a new fiance at that time. And he beat me in the bathroom so bad that he was covered in toilet water. So I overdosed on half a bottle of Tofranil and almost died. My heart stopped. And whenever I was in the hospital, my foster mom from my second foster mom actually showed up because she heard the call over the scanner and comforted my mom while I was dying in the hospital. And her boyfriend actually told my mom that she should just let me die. And then when I was placed in the hospital after I got out and came to and things of that nature. And then after that, I stayed at my mom's for a little while and got rehospitalized again. By this time, I'm 13. That guy was out of the picture at that point and all that stuff, but she kept bringing other men in and they like to come after me. My mom had a drinking problem. She referred to herself as the weekend warrior. And I saw a pattern of behavior developing and I heard they couldn't hit you in state's custody. So whenever I was 13, I opted to stay in state's custody for my own safety. And I literally refused to go home. So they put me in my third foster home. At this time, I think I was not in CPS. I think I was probably a youth service case because I had refused to go home and I was rebellious and wouldn't listen. Whenever I was in the hospital, whenever I was 13, I actually made a runaway plan to get out of the hospital. I was pretty wild. But I was tired of being beaten. And whenever I had overdosed, whenever I was 12, I felt so, how do I put this? I didn't even feel worthy of sleeping in a bed. It's the best way I can put it. So I slept in my closet, and that was ultimately what saved my life, is because I slept in my closet. So whenever I went into seizures, my mom woke up and I was able to get medical attention. Had I not, she would have woke up to a corpse. So fast forward back to my third foster home. I was there a few months, and it ended whenever we went on a camping trip. And a guy that we were on a camping trip with, I think it was a friend of the foster parents that I had. My foster parents were drunk. My foster mom passed out, and this guy took me across Beach Fork Lake and exposed himself to me. And whenever I told originally I told my foster brother's, which was her biological son's girlfriend, because she was who I was most comfortable with on the camping trip. And of course, she told her boyfriend, which was my foster brother, who told his mother. But when my foster mom found out about it, she tried to silence me. She told me not to tell the foster care agency because she was afraid she was going to get in trouble for being drunk. And whenever I did, she had me removed from her home. So off to my fourth foster home. My fourth foster home was a temporary one. And my fifth foster home, I was done with foster care after my third foster home. So being the person that I was at that time, I wouldn't stay inside the foster home at all. I stayed down the block in the weeds. So much so that the foster kids in the foster home actually felt sorry for me and brought me food. I actually wasn't there very long, and they put me, they were going to take me to Barbersville School. And when they told me that, for my next placement, well, heck, I didn't know what Barbersville School was, but it didn't sound like a very pleasant place to me. And quite frankly, I didn't want to go. So I jumped out of a social worker's moving vehicle and ran away. And then I wouldn't, they finally caught up with me. I went to a stranger's house, and they were very nice to me. I never caught their names. And I used the phone to call my CASA. I had a CASA. It's a court appointed special advocate, that was instrumental in, the case with my dad going to court. He was instrumental in, teaching me that not all men are perverts. He gave me an example of a man that's not a pervert, so it didn't apply to all men. And he even helped me with my schoolwork, and encouraged me to pursue that. But then I ended up going to Barbersville School. I stayed there about 9 months, and then I spent 4.5 years in Golden Girls. And I had my ups and downs there, but they never gave up on me. I kind of hell on wheels at that point. I was turmoil. I was not easy to deal with, stubborn as all get out. And quite frankly, the group home itself went through a lot with me, I'm sure. But they never gave up on me. And that's my childhood home, the only safety and stability I knew in my childhood. And they encouraged me to go to college, so much so they enrolled me even though I didn't think I was ready. And they set me on a path for success. I credit them with it, being put on that path, because they did. I was wanting to go to community college, and they said, no, I think you're ready for university. They believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And that was important. Because most people up to that point had failed me before I tried. But despite missing most of middle school because of the rocky home life situation and being moved around so much, despite missing most of middle school, I actually ended up graduating high school on time with high honors. And I had 13 poems published by the time I turned 18. And then whenever I went to college, I started out in remedial math. And I went on to graduate top of my class in social work with honors, a 3.34 overall GPA, a 4.0 in social work, and my senior thesis of over 400 pages was sent to the president of Marshall University. And it was on the correlation between domestic violence, child abuse, and animal abuse. I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm just validating.
Oh, okay. I was just wanting to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Not at all.
But then I went on and got, and I've already told you, I went on and got all that stuff as far as my credentials. But that's overall. And whenever I was 15 is when I testified against my dad. It was 2 trials, actually, not one. The first one was a hung jury. The second one is whenever he was convicted of 11 counts of sexual abuse. There were various different charges, but collectively he was sentenced to 45 to 105 years, and he was to serve them consecutively, not concurrently, so not the same time, but separately. So essentially he would never get out because his psychological found him to be an ingrained pedophile, incapable of rehabilitation.
Wow. And so, and as you were hearing, I wanted to do it over mute because I didn't want to interrupt your story. But yes, there were a lot of validations that I was doing and just a lot of wows on my end. And just because it definitely is an incredible story. And I think there's a lot there that you highlighted. And it definitely is an incredible journey for sure, by far. But I think too is just you definitely shined light on several different things, a couple of which I of course want to highlight and like emphasize and bring to light, but also just that. So I think it's interesting that you use a lot of the words like, like wild, hello wheels and all that. And I hear you because, you had your, past there and like things like that. But honestly, see, that's not what just hearing it. I mean, I know I wasn't there and I wasn't during that experience, but honestly, I was just like, I just love how you just never ruled yourself out. Like, you know what I mean? So I just think like, as I heard it, I get that it probably came off to everyone else as rebellious and you know what I mean, and just hard to deal with and like, things like that. But to me, I was like, wow, with every situation, you knew you deserved better. If it felt threatening, you found a way to get out. Like you tried your best, to be able to do what you had to do. And yes, there was a lot of running away, but I think like you were definitely trying to get to better. And I just think like it's just incredible to me because I feel like that's what society does though. They're like, oh, the runaways, we don't worry about those because obviously they're choosing to leave. You know what I mean? So there must be a reason why they want to, be away from home or, all of that. And so like there's no need to help them because they made that choice. First of all, you have no idea what they're leaving behind. Like nobody just willingly wants to leave a stable place unless it's not stable. And so I just think like it was incredible for me to hear that because I'm like, no, I mean, I wouldn't know what else to do either. I just think it's awesome that you just kept trying with whatever it was. You kept like trying to find a new beginning. And I'm glad that you eventually found it. It's just, of course, the only part that pains me is that it had to take so many times. You know what I mean? You had to start over with different homes, had to reinvent yourself with each new environment that you were in, get readjusted to a new foster family. None of these things are easy things, but you never lost that will, like that will to survive, that will to want to keep going, and that will to choose yourself. So I think that it's interesting that you said everybody they did put you last. You know what I mean? They didn't expect much of you and all of those things, but I feel like a part of you did. So like, even though you had all these negative messages and you had, all this abuse coming at you, a part of you knew you didn't deserve it. I'm hoping. And I mean, I know, I'm sure you know it now, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
like, exactly. But speaking to that young person, I'm sure exactly there was a part of you that knew it then. And so it was hard, you know what I mean? Because you had everybody else not telling you that, but you knew, and you kept going because of that. You kept going to that new opportunity. And I just was in amazement. So I was just listening to the story with all the snaps, with all the validation, and just honestly, just incredibly impressed and just so glad that we're here now. You kind of get engrossed in people's stories sometimes and are like, wow, like what happened to that person? But then for you to like come out of that and say, but now I'm this published poet and I do all these things and I have a bachelor's, is just like, wow. Cause I mean, hearing it, you would think like, what could have happened to that person? And so many things could have. But thankfully, you got to that one place, the girls' home. We definitely want to attribute them for sure. But also that you had these certain people that came on your path, like the advocate, and who were able to provide that. So now I just think, like, with that being said, now that you're, starting to talk to us about that, could you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, who, we got to hear a lot about the abuse and the negative messages, but
Mhm.
just who are the people, like, what did those positive messages look like at the girls' home? Like, what kind of methods did they use? What helped you to get, like you said, on that path to success? What did that part of your journey look like?
The only thing I needed was safety, and that's what they provided because that's what I had nowhere else. I just needed a safe space to do what I wanted to do to get to where I wanted to be, which was, I wanted to go to college. I had dreams, I had goals, I had things I wanted to do with my life, and they gave me the opportunity by providing a safe space for me to live, because without safety, I'm sorry, you just don't have anything. Because you can have food, water, and air, but what's the point if you're not safe?
I absolutely can't agree more. And then I think it's also, and it's good to hear that, like we were discussing that in the midst of all that, you had all these goals. So I'm definitely curious, like, did they change over time, like what they look like? But also, I'd love to hear about the poetry. So you said that I believe, like, you had, I know many of them that were published. I forget, you said maybe like during college, or like when you got to college. I can't remember
They've
exactly.
been republished recently as well.
Okay, great. So what I'm curious about is when did that start also for you? Like when did you start writing them? Like how you went on to get them published? All of
Fifth grade. I wrote my first poem in fifth grade. And that introduced me to poetry. My fifth grade teacher, before all hell broke loose, showed me how to write a poem. And I still remember my first poem that I wrote. And she actually never had mentioned anything until I wrote that poem, like anything special about any abilities I might have or anything. But she actually complimented me on my poem that I wrote. And that kind of stuck with me. And then whenever I was in first grade, one of the keys to my resilience is education. But the reason that is because the message I got from a play in first grade that I remember, and I remember the moral, not the play. And it was, knowledge is the one thing nobody can ever take from you. I was like, wow, there's something nobody can take from you? I'll take it. Because everything at home was turmoil. I was like, God, that's my resilience factor. So I always clung to that.
which is definitely.
I'm sorry.
Well, go ahead. No, you finish.
Well, I just wanted to say that as far as whenever I started writing poetry was fifth grade, but I didn't actually start using it until high school.
Oh, so that's okay. So that's interesting. So does that mean that like it more as like a coping mechanism? You didn't use it till high school or like all that? Okay. So then what kind of subjects would you write about then? Like when early on, and then what did they look like more like in high school then versus?
One of my poems is called A Child's Hell. I have 16 various poems that was just recently republished. 13 of them had been previously published. 3 of them are newly published. But Dying Inside was another poem. Who is another one. That's just 3 of them. But, a lot of it talked about how I felt inside, torn apart, shattered, essentially. And it really showed what was going on inside as far as my emotional state at that time. So, yeah, it was pretty in-depth poetry and reflective of how my reality was inside me.
Absolutely. But then when you said that you started using them in high school, like did the subject change? Was it that, you know what I mean, you used them more therapeutically, or like what was the change there in high school?
The poetry was the therapy for me.
Okay.
I didn't trust therapists after I met with my first one at all, because she trash talked my mom and said things that weren't true about my mom to my face, and I was 11 at the time, and I pretty much gave her a big F you and ran away from her office and down the block.
Understood. And unfortunately, that definitely is also the case, that sometimes we do seek professional help and it might not necessarily provide what we are seeking. And so unfortunately, we might need to get it from other places, which, it definitely is unfortunate when that happens. But you also now are, like you said, you have your bachelor's, in social work and all of that. So what inspired you to then, take that route, like, and all of that? And like, what is it that what does it look like typically now in the world of a social worker?
Well, I have a passion for social work, a deep passion, and I actually channeled that rage and anger and things of that nature into something productive, I guess. And that was what I do now. It's I don't have that rage or anything like that anymore. It's just a passion, a very fiery passion. But to work through that, I actually channeled all that energy into school and pretty much funneled it into my work.
Right. And is this indicative of the goals that you had before? Like, when you said that, the safety finally allowed you a great, safe, and secure place to be able to explore those goals that you had. Were being a social worker, was that one of the goals you had before, or is that something that you got inspired to do later on in life?
I got inspired to do that later on. I did not initially choose social work. I was wanting to be a nurse. But after a car wreck and a miscarriage, I hated hospitals. I was like, no, this is not for me. Yeah, I like my second year of college after the car wreck that I got into, I had a miscarriage. I found out I was pregnant after the wreck, and 2 weeks later miscarried. Right at finals, flunked almost the whole year, definitely that semester. But I also had to go to like a chiropractor and things of that nature, lots of doctor's appointments the following semester. And I missed finals for the second semester too. So I did not pass those classes. So needless to say, I almost flunked out my second year, and I had to really evaluate whether I was going to stay in school or not at that juncture. And I almost quit because, my anatomy teacher had told me that I had the inability to learn. That was first semester. So that didn't help matters, especially with low self-esteem anyway. And that being my area that I really clung to, somebody telling me that from that high level really, really, really got to me, which I went back to visitor after I took biology and made an A without attending most of the class. Just to rub it in her face.
As you should.
I did. I was like, and you told me I have the inability to learn? I think different. But
Absolutely.
That's another story.
Well, very good though. Way to stick it to, like him be able to show and prove it. Because I mean, you've definitely proven that many times that you've been able to rise from like negative situations and all of that. But that was definitely some incredible adversity to have overcome as well. So then, I mean, I hear you. I definitely think that, and it's interesting that it led you to a whole, new career switch. So did anybody show you social work? Did you come across anyone, or like what led you to then that field?
Recruiters in the college. I went to an event that the college had, and there was a social work program there. And they introduced me to the program and told me about it. And I was like, huh, I didn't even know that social work existed as far as like at the university at that point. So I learned more about it, and I took social work, the intro to social work class. And I really liked the class. I got a C in that class, but despite getting a C in that, I still declared it a major. And then I pulled 19 hours all the way through, taking extra classes and doing extra credit and everything else, and made straight A's the rest of the program.
Wow, which is definitely no small feat. Definitely incredible.
Very writing intensive. It was a lot of work.
Right.
But definitely was well worth it.
Man. But so, and of course, just like a walking testament to all the things that you have been able to accomplish. But also, I kind of feel like I breezed past it a little bit, but like I said, you've had a lot that you've already went through early on. You go to college and you do all these great things as well. But you also had.
There's more adversity that I had. The major one that I had in college wasn't the miscarriage. Oh, it was actually a domestic violence relationship I ended up getting into. And he actually used the video as leverage to rape me for months until I got enough leverage on him to get a hold of that video and burn it so I could get away from it.
Wow, which definitely, and see, I think too, that's a lot what you're shedding light on as well, is that you've definitely shown, brought to light different types of abuse. And so, and you mentioned that, and you mentioned how unfortunately anyone, but including yourself, can unfortunately be the victim of multiple types of abuse. So it's definitely not this like easy, like simply, it's already not simply defined when it comes to abuse. Like it's very complicated in ways that
it can happen to anybody.
Absolutely. And I definitely can agree more. And I feel like what's interesting in your case, especially, is that, multiple ways were being used. And so unfortunately, if somebody's already in that kind of victimized state and already having to endure one type of abuse, the fact that it can be further compounded by the fact that they're inflicting another type at the exact same time that can definitely happen. And unfortunately, I feel like that's something that we're still learning about as a society, just because we don't always give enough awareness to the different types of abuses that exist. But you yourself have discussed, sexual abuse for sure being one of them, but domestic, and it's happened more than one time. And so unfortunately, for us to think about like certain type of abuses and certain type of abusers is not necessarily the truth. I mean, there's a lot of people who inflict abuse, use those different methodologies, and you yourself, like, have seen that. And so, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that and help, educate us on, like, what that looks like, and like ways that you dealt to be able to, cope with it, and how you might still educate others on those issues as well.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're wanting. I took a year off after the rape situation. I had to recover. I took a year off school. That's why I graduated in 2008 rather than 2007. And I actually had to write Marshall and tell them what happened. And they gave me leeway. But my last year of college, I didn't have financial aid. But I had to take a year off to recover. Luckily, I had the Brown family at that time, who was my boyfriend's family, who helped. And well, he was my boyfriend at the time, so, which is now my ex-husband. So, I really owe them a lot for that, because they were there for me through that. They helped me through a lot there. So.
No, absolutely. And my apologies if my question wasn't clear. It kind of was, it was like a mixture of a question and
that was a very broad spectrum of a question.
Yes, which I mean, I always love to have as open as possible, like to give you
oh yeah, I totally understand.
Right. But I think too that and you definitely shed light on it, and like how you coped, and things like that. But I think what was interesting is that we were talking about how abuse can be complicated. And so you talked about yourself. I think you definitely mentioned too how you can use certain things as leverage, like you said. And so, like, I mean, I'm glad that you used that video and like that was your escape. But during the time that you were, being abused, it was also what was used as a threat. And so what's interesting is that individuals.
Oh no, I burned that video. I didn't use it.
Oh yeah, you didn't use it as a threat. I meant your abuser. And
yeah.
So I meant like,
yeah, he used it as leverage over my head.
Exactly. And
because it would have ruined my career.
Absolutely. And I think that's what a lot of abusers do, unfortunately, is that they always use something. It's either some kind of vulnerability, it's either some kind of trigger that they get to know about. And what's unfortunate too is that at some point in time, it's usually somebody that we do trust. And so we confide in them certain issues that are going on. And we usually tell them, not in hopes that they're going to turn it around and use it against us, but that, it's something that we can definitely like confide in them. But unfortunately, in this case, it was definitely used. And I think that that's, what's interesting about it is that unfortunately too, a lot of that abuse, you can see that, it can follow us, unfortunately, because, you had a lot of it that happened, as your child. And then, now as an adult, you were able to, face it in different ways. I mean, I know now you're in a different path and, things are definitely look a lot brighter, but it was interesting how that happened before.
Well, actually, it was hell trying to get away from him, because I went to the hospitals. The cops knew, the hospitals knew. It was my word against his, according to the hospital. According to the cops, they protected him, not me. They did nothing to him. They told me that I had to leave because he had kids. And then let's see here. Whenever I went to get my DVP, he was so brazen about what he was doing. He tried to intimidate the female judge that gave me my DVP into dropping it. I only got custody of the residence for 4 days to move my stuff out.
Wow. And then that's the thing too with our systems is that, it makes it very difficult then, because you develop the courage and you want to go get help. And then unfortunately to be faced with that kind of like reaction to it, it can be so defeating. And so I know that there's a lot of people that might be listening and thinking the same thing, that, it either validates why they haven't gotten help or what it is. But I also think too, I hope that if we can inspire anything, is that this is why it's also helpful that we need more individuals who have this kind of knowledge to help change these systems, because I definitely think that they haven't been made by people that have faced abuse. I think that's pretty clear, because the way they set them up, they're not very victim centered. And so I think that's such a clear example of it. You had a thought on that?
Actually, whenever I just went about it a different way. Instead of going through an embarrassing rape trial, You know, he told me that he had his truck burned, so I turned him in for insurance fraud. He got charged with 4 felonies.
And the mute was button was not working at first, but yes, but see, and that's interesting. And then I think too, at least in that case, even though you use a different method, although it was a great one, I mean, at least it led to some kind of like, some kind of victory and just at least some kind of like successful outcome. I think I'm glad that at least in that case it did occur, even if it did have to be a certain way or whatever it was, but to at least get to that place is great. But also I am glad to hear, although I'm sure it took a tremendous amount of courage, and I'm curious, how you prepared, like you said, but you also got another victory that I heard was with your father. So eventually, the fact that he eventually got charged. I mean, it definitely took some time, to get to that place.
5
But I'm
years.
okay.
He eluded justice for 5 years. He was on the
Wow.
run.
Okay.
And as far as I know, he was going on and abusing other people.
Do
I
you know
found
how?
that out yesterday from my mom.
Okay. So do you ever know how it was that he was eventually able to get? You have no idea on like how that happened, how he was
How
after
he
the
was
5
how he was captured? Or
absolutely like found, yep, and been able to be brought to justice.
oh, my mom had to entrap him.
Okay. Okay.
She had to
Never.
say that she wanted to get back with him, and he met her in a certain spot and they arrested him.
Okay. And once that happened, I'm sure that brought up a lot of emotions for you. And like, and especially once they told you that you were then going to have to testify for him, was there anything that you did in particular to prepare for that? Or
Yep,
did you? Okay. So
nothing.
you had
I
to,
walked in and told my story on the stand.
okay. And see, I think like too, that's just another testament to your resiliency though, because I mean, this isn't the first time you've said that like you've been asked to do things that for anyone else would be incredibly difficult. And just, it's almost like you haven't always had a choice though. You know what I mean? It's just reflective of your strength and just having to, do all the things that you're asked to do and not always have time to really prepare and think through them, but definitely like get them done essentially.
Well, I mean, I've always been that way. Like from the time I was like really, really little. The first time I testified, I was 6 years old. And it was whenever the neighbor threw rocks at me whenever I was riding my bike past her house. My dad fought with all the neighbors and there was a lot of drama there. So she took it out on me whenever I was riding my bike past her house and threw rocks at me and I hurt my foot. So we went and ended up suing them and going to court over that. So at 6 years old, I was on the stand telling them what happened. And that's when I learned what a judge was. I didn't know how to reach a judge. I didn't even know how to call 911 until after I was 10 years old. But I did know what a judge was. And I remember whenever I was probably 7 or 8 years old, writing "Dear Judge" on a piece of paper and writing what was going on at my house, wondering what he would think about that.
Wow.
But I didn't have anywhere to send it to.
But like you've done like with poetry, like you've definitely when you wanted to get a message out, you've at least written it down. And even if, like you said, at that point you didn't have anywhere to send, but at least that message was, you were at least capturing your thoughts in some way, in some like written form, and being able to do that. But I think that's another thing that's incredible about that is that exposure. And so I think that yes, where that might not be, I know that's not the typical thing for a child to be exposed to, is to like, here's how to learn how to testify. I definitely don't think that's on the list of like normal lessons for a child. Absolutely not. But I think it definitely gave you that, unique preparation though, honestly. And so like you weren't afraid. I mean, it wasn't your first time, like you said, to have done that. But I think it's still incredible that you were able to, and I'm glad you still had that opportunity to be able to do that. Just because not everybody gets that chance to be able to report. A lot of people don't want to, and we can understand why. Just because, like we talked about, the system isn't always favorable. You don't always get the outcome you're looking for. And honestly, too, it's difficult because sometimes even when a person does get a punishment, it still doesn't always erase the feelings, right? That you still might have. And so like, the pain is still there. Absolutely. But I'm just glad that you at least had that chance. And I don't know if it brought some resolution for you, but I'm just glad that you at least had that opportunity to do it.
Well, I didn't even testify against my dad for me. I knew he couldn't hurt me anymore. I did it to protect everyone else because I knew he would hurt other people.
Absolutely.
He had to be stopped. He was dangerous.
And I think that's a great reason to do it. So I think I've definitely talked to individuals in the past, because especially when I worked as directly as an advocate at a local rape crisis center, and I definitely agree that that's not the first time I've heard that. You know what I mean? To let that be the reason, but it's still a great one, you know. And so it's like it's really for the greater good. And so sometimes, I mean, I agree with you. Like it's not necessarily just for that, you know, individual recognition or anything like that, or for that individual resolution, really, because it's not like it provides like the neat bow ending, you know, and all tied up like that. But it is for that. It is, you know, keeping that in mind. And that's why it's like whenever those myths are spread that, you know, anybody who's a victim would want to victimize other people. I know that your brother did it when he was younger, which is true. We've definitely seen that as children that
Oh, he
happens,
never stopped.
and that's unfortunate. And I definitely know that that can occur. But I definitely think, you know, whenever the myths are spread that as adults we like to perpetrate, you know, a lot of that abuse, most of the time that's not the case. A lot of people who are abused don't want to abuse other people. They don't want
Right.
them exactly to feel how they felt. And so no, you're definitely like shedding light on that by saying, even when I testified, it wasn't for me. It was really for that greater good, and knowing that I just wanted to make sure that I did my part to ensure that this abuse did not continue.
Well, the reason I initially told was I got tired of seeing my brother being beaten on. And, you know, they told me the sexual abuse was wrong. I didn't know until fourth grade. But the reason behind me telling was like, I can help my brother. And he doesn't have to do anything. I have a photographic memory. And it tortured me more to see him being beaten on and the way he was treated than it did me.
See, and that's such an interesting perspective on it, because as I was hearing that, that's what I was thinking. It's like, wow, you know, for you, for this to still be also a person that abused you, and for you to still want to turn around and still help that person is already something incredible. But I think you just also just shed light on the unique perspective you had, because, you know, at this, even though this was somebody that was abusing you, you got to see them be abused, and nothing about that felt great. You know, there was nothing about that that felt good. It wasn't like it made you feel better about what was happening to you. It was still pain that was inflicted that you were witnessing and wanted to be able to put an end to. And I think you've done that a lot with a lot of things in your life too. Like I'm sure when you write your poems, they're also with the intention of providing some kind of positive message. They were therapy for you, but you in turn want to be able to, you know, help others. And I'm sure that that's, you know, some of the message that you share. And I'm curious too, like with the republishing, because I've actually never heard of like republishing. I've heard of like publishing for the first time. Does that mean that they were resent? Like, did you need to bring them
They're
back to the
published on the
surface?
SCSA blog now.
Okay.
Yes, and a couple of them have been used by the Humanity Preservation Foundation as well.
Oh, very nice, which is awesome. And so, is that? Do you think? Would you say that that's it? Like, do you usually have a common theme that you're always looking for your poems? Are they always about different things, or like, you
I
know,
write
what's your
about everything.
process? Okay, I hear you. So it doesn't matter, whatever's on your mind at the time.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Sometimes
Okay.
I even do a brain dump, and that's how I got my goal list. I've got a 4-page type goal list that I'm working on, and I wrote it in an hour and a half.
Okay. And I know it might be classified. Are there any goals on there that you're able to share with us, or anything that you know you got to
Well,
keep on the back burner?
2 pages of them have to do with sharing my life story, which sharing my life story is actually my closure on that book, essentially. And, you know, this is a new chapter / book that I am starting, kind of like a new beginning.
Amazing. So you said you are working on creating a book then in the future,
I am.
or oh, lovely. So
I'm
we'll
also
definitely
writing a book,
okay. Very good.
but I was also generally speaking,
Right. In
closing that
general.
in
Right.
general, yes.
All right. They want to
But I'm going to
provide.
write up to the point of that in a book I'm working on now. And it's actually a work in progress.
Very
So,
good. Now, are there anything so currently? So speaking of current projects and things that you're doing, are there any other things that you're currently working on, or what other ways that you're trying to reach others? You know, provide these positive message. What are things that you're currently doing?
I share my story every opportunity that I get. Um, I want to uh, use my life story uh, to encourage others to share their story. to shed light into that darkness, because the more people who share their story, the less the darkness can shield what's going on in it. It shines light and eliminates that darkness.
It absolutely does. And I think too that, and even if anybody at the beginning is just, hearing the details of your story is is taken aback or think it's, a lot that's being shared and all that. I mean, because first of all, I definitely appreciate your transparency and, honesty that you shared with us, and even, finding us worthy to be able to, help you as you share your story. I also just think I agree with you. I think it needs to stop being that, though, that like we find these details so stark and so like, and really let that be the norm. Like, actually, no, let's all share our traumas. Let's all indulge in that, right? Because a lot of us have had it. But what we're more accustomed to is not sharing them, or, denouncing them or making them seem like they're taboo.
Dissociation is what that leads to.
Absolutely. And for viewers who don't know exactly what dissociation is, could you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Basically, whenever you don't believe what's going on, it's put in the back of somebody's head, and they think they're crazy, and they either forget it, or the brain does something else with it, and they lose sight of reality. Maybe it skews people's reality.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's fascinating about the brain. So I think that, and a lot of times too, your brain or all of our brains essentially can notice a kind of threat and definitely wants to do something to get away from that threat. Whatever it is, the brain absolutely wants to be able to protect people at all costs. And so, whether that is retreating, like in your case, whether it was running away at one point, whatever it is, there's always something, there's always some kind of go-to. And I think dissociation can be that for individuals as well. Like you said, it definitely is
to protect.
Absolutely.
If you're given a situation that you do not know how to deal with, and then you try to get help, you're not believed, you're told you're crazy, it didn't happen that way, and that people do that a lot. Nothing's done. What do you do with that? The brain has to function somehow. It's a survival mechanism.
It absolutely is. And so I think that that's the interesting thing about it. Like you said, it's definitely a separation from reality. Like, it gives you an opportunity to go somewhere else in your mind. But again, like we talked about, it is a protective thing. And so, like, I know it might be a novel concept for some that maybe have never heard of it or have never, had it defined, but it definitely is a survival tactic. And so for some, I definitely have heard from people in the past where it also can put you in a vulnerable state, in the fact that, you're not necessarily present in the moment. But at the same time, on the protective side, though, what it does is it also does help you to not deal with whatever's in front of you, whether it is a trauma or something of that nature. So at least it kind of does that dual feature in that respect, but it does help essentially.
I think it's just a balancing act of the brain and the body. It tries to escape what it can't handle.
Exactly. And see, I think that that's also the major thing here, is that that's what's fascinating about our brain. It knows when it's too much. When there is way too much sensory input, or when there's way too much going on, it might do what's called, exactly. It's gonna be what's called a shutdown. But at the same time, it's a good thing. You know what I mean? Because instead of being fully present in that moment and seeing all of that happen, the brain is like, nope, I would rather retreat, get away from this situation. There's way too much going on here. I got you. I see that there's a lot going on. So how about let's go somewhere else, somewhere safer, somewhere quieter, somewhere else. And so I think that's also why it's so helpful to do things with our minds, you know what I mean? Because our mind is such a powerful thing. And so I think it's incredible too, like with you and how you capture all of those thoughts in poetry or, whatever it is, that you're able to do these things to then capture them in that way and then reprogram your brain to think positively. Because
I had to retrain my brain, and I had to retrain my brain whenever I was channeling everything in college, and I used the things that I learned in social work actually to help me do that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you're in a field where you help others, but it also helped you. So it's like,
it was
exactly,
two directional.
Right. And so like it's this, multi, beneficial thing. So it's definitely like, and because of that, it definitely is a great field to, be into. It's to, one where you're able to help others. I definitely think nursing would have been great, but clearly you were wanted elsewhere. And so I'm glad that you're in this field, because there are a lot of great contributions, within that field as well.
Actually, my ex-mother-in-law, she's the one that told me, she suggested that I go into social work too.
See, so that's interesting. It wasn't just, only one person too. So you're kind of like full circle as to where, individuals were seeing you at. So that's definitely interesting. See, and with that, and since we're like nearing the end of our time, I'm definitely curious, like, are there ways that, individuals can support you, whatever efforts you have? Are there ways that people can connect with you further and all of that, or any other things that you care to share with all of us?
Well, actually, as far as like, one thing I would like to emphasize is never give up. And if your voice isn't heard, definitely keep telling your story. Don't change it. Don't change it for anybody. If they don't believe it, doesn't matter. Own your truth. And it's better to have shattered silence than shattered people.
Amen to that. I definitely think that's like a whole word. Better to have shattered silence than shattered people. I definitely can't agree more. Now, there's, like I said, is there anything else that you're currently working on that individuals can connect
Oh,
with you on, or anything like that?
oh, well, no, I've got the Women Igniting Change program. I'm going to be in that for a year. So, it's the initiative that I'm actually working on is called Rise from Shattered Silence to Strength. And I'm just in the beginning of working on it right now. But I'm working on an actual center that I'd like to open that has a trauma focus in it for people who have experienced trauma. So, let me pull that up and I'll share some of that information with you.
Awesome.
It's going to be on trauma informed education
Okay. Very cool.
for foster care recipients.
Ooh, specifically. Very nice.
Yeah, that's the initiative I'm working
on. Okay. And so, and that's definitely a very admirable one and really, amazing one. And just also just again, so full circle, like to be able to then, be able to help others, especially like in similar situations. Because you definitely mentioned too, something that we don't hear enough about is the foster care journey and experience. And so as you definitely described, that's also not like a band-aid or easy solution or situation. You're bouncing around from place to place. You don't necessarily stay in one particular place. Unfortunately, you're not absent of abuse in some situations. Some of them can be great because there are great foster parents out there, just like anything. But unfortunately, there are some that can be troublesome and can add as well. So it's just amazing that you're now turning your efforts into helping other foster children as well, and educating others as far as all that is concerned.
Well, I consider other foster children, I guess, people who have aged out of all kinds. That's my siblings. Those are my brothers and those are my sisters.
See, exactly. So nope, it's family at this point. So definitely that. So, and I'm glad. And so with that being said, if any of your siblings or others want to connect with you, is there any way that they can find you?
Oh yeah, of course. I've got Facebook. Best way to reach me is on Facebook.
Awesome. What is the handle that you have on Facebook?
Jessica Green Brown.
Okay. So if individuals just search Jessica Green Brown, they'll find you there.
Sometimes it's hard to find me. I can copy and paste it in.
Okay.
But like if there's chat or something here.
Absolutely. Yeah. What we'll also do is that when we go to post this video, we'll add it there as well. So you can actually send me the link. Yep. And so viewers, you'll be able to see it down below. And we'll make sure that we put it in the comments and all that. Do you have any other social media or anything else, or Facebook is the main?
No, I usually use just Facebook.
All right, cool. Which keeps it simple, keeps it easy. And most of us have Facebook, so we can definitely find you that way. Awesome. So do you have any other closing thoughts, closing words, or,
There's definitely hope. You can rise above anything. Anything adverse that you face, you can rise above it.
Absolutely.
And the way I see it, we rise together.
I agree with that. And so with that, Jessica, thank you so very, very much for being on our show today, for trusting us to be able to help you as you're sharing your story, for sharing all of those incredible sentiments, all that incredible journey, everything that you have done, everything that you are currently doing. Of course, we wish you nothing but the best with all of that. And if any of this resonated with any of you that are seeing and watching this today, I definitely encourage you to reach out to Jessica, but also please know that you're not alone. And as Jessica mentioned, that there's absolutely hope in the situation. We're better to shatter that silence instead of being a shattered human being and walking this earth and suffering in silence when, you could be sharing it and, opening that door to that new healing. And so like Jessica did, I hope that you feel encouraged to be able to do that. And we encourage you to, add this to your community and add this to your resources for sure. So thank you again, Jessica. And thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.